Couple more minutes. All right, one more minute. All right. Let's put our memory work away. Let's grab our catechism. We're going to be on page 13 in the front. A little quick, rapid review. God gave us the 10 Commandments, these moral laws that teach us what is right and what is wrong. It shows us his design for us, and it gives it to us out of love, right? He loves us enough to not let us live in chaos, but teach us what is right and what is wrong, because it's a better way for us to live, to be obedient to his design as we are his followers, as he was building a nation of Israel, and how he builds his church, us, the new Israel today, as followers of Jesus. The first 3 commandments deal with our relationship with God. First one, you shall have no other gods. So we want to place God first in our life. If this relationship is right, then these relationships can be right. If this relationship's not right, then we're going to struggle with these relationships, because God teaches us what does it mean to have healthy relationships, and it all begins with him. Because when we're focused on him, we're not focused on ourself, right? Second commandment, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. And so he teaches us to have respect when we are talking about him, when we're praying, praising, giving thanks, and that we're not using his name in vain or as a cuss word or slang, right? The third commandment, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. So one day a week, we live a balanced life it's a day of worship, a day of family time, and a day of rest, all right, to be energized for the battles that we face out there the rest of the week. So those were the first 3. Then 4 through 10 has to do with our relationship with each other. It starts with the home. The strength of any nation starts in the house. That's where it is. The breakdown of any nation is in the home. So the 4th commandment, honor your father and mother. It teaches God's design for authority, that authority is a good thing, that's a gift to us that helps protect us, provide for us, and to take care of us, and to be able to be the authority to put these laws into action. And so we as followers of Jesus, we believe in law and order, right, of doing things God's way. And then the 5th commandment, God's value of life, you shall not murder. We're not to take innocent life. 6th commandment, shall not commit adultery, teaches us his design for marriage. One man, one woman, forever. A promise they make to the Lord and to each other. And how sex is a gift from God only to be used in that marriage, right? And so that was the 6th commandment. 7th commandment was about God's design to protect our property and possessions. You shall not steal. 8th commandment, we talked about last week. Most powerful weapon in the world is your tongue, right? is your tongue. And so with that tongue, we can give life, we can encourage, we can build up. And with that same tongue, we can tear down. We can ruin people's reputations. We can gossip. We can spread lies. We can slander. We can destroy. And so that tongue is powerful. Tonight, your long memory work of the 9th and 10th commandment that have a lot to do with one word called coveting, right? And he teaches us not to covet. The difference between the 9th and 10th commandment, we see that the 9th commandment is not coveting non-living material things. The 10th commandment is not coveting living things. And so in the 9th commandment we have, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not scheme to get our neighbor's inheritance or house or get it in a way which only appears right, but help and be of service to him in keeping it. In the 7th commandment, we are to help protect our brothers and sisters in Christ of their property and possessions. You shall not steal. Same thing with coveting here in the 9th commandment. Instead of having a strong desire to want that for ourselves, we should be happy for those who have those things. It's okay for us to work hard and to save money and to earn it and buy it ourselves, but we shouldn't try to scheme in any way that we deserve that, we should have that, they shouldn't, right? And so that's the thing there. 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. That's a living thing. His manservant, maidservant, ox, donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not entice or force away our neighbor's wife, workers, animals, or turn them against him, but urge them to stay and do their duty. All right? So that is the 9th and 10th commandment. And so let's unpack that a little bit. The 9th commandment, the purpose of the 9th commandment is to protect our non-living things, our non-living things. The 10th commandment is to protect our living things, people, all right? So what does it mean to covet? It's a strong desire, that this strong desire has wrapped into this desire some negative attitudes. And these negative attitudes are jealousy, anger, bitterness, lusting after someone. It's envious, and it's a longing for. We're so focused on wanting something that God doesn't want us to have, that somebody else already has, to where we have these different emotions and attitudes of anger, envy, jealousy, and wanting ways to get that for ourselves, And so that's what it means to covet. What's so bad about coveting? It shows lack of contentment for what God has given to us. We talked about this with the 7th commandment, you shall not steal, that we are designed to help protect our property and possessions and also to protect other people's property and possessions. And we talked about the secret of contentment, the Bible says. And contentment is being happy with what we have, happy and blessed with what God has given us, not always wanting more. And we talked about being a giver, not a taker, right? And so that's what can be bad about coveting, is it always has a lack of contentment. The person's always wanting what somebody else has. And they're focused on those things instead of focused on the blessings that they have in their life, all right? Which brings true joy. It leads to other sins like lying, stealing, and adultery. We're going to get into this, and we're going to see sin has a snowball effect. It can start out small as snowball, and turns into a big snowman. And we're going to see biblical examples of that, of how something can start so small, but if we don't confess that sin, be sorry for that sin, turn away from that sin, and we allow it to build, it can turn into something very huge. And it can even lead to people's death if they don't get control of it, all right? Sin has a progressive nature to it, James talks about, the snowball effect. Each one is tempted when, by his own evil desire, wanting something that God doesn't want us to have, evil desire, he is dragged away and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, given birth to sin, And then sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. So sin starts where? Right here. It first starts with a thought of us wanting to do something God tells us not to do. This was always shown to me growing up in a cartoon where it would show the character. And on this shoulder, there would be a little angel, and their shoulder would be a little devil, right? And the angel would be like, don't do it, don't do it, don't steal, don't steal. And the devil over here would be like, take it, take it, take it, take it, take it. And then the main character would have this moral dilemma. Do I follow what God is trying to tell me, or do I follow what I want and what Satan is trying to get me to do? Okay? And so, what happens when we covet? We move from a thought to a feeling to an action. It moves us to get things we want through sinful means. It's the way we're wired. Our feelings, our emotions, our feelings come from our thoughts. And then that can lead to our actions. So, if I am depressed, my thoughts can be all negative things, and that everything's gloom and doom, and that I can't see any blessing really. And I see everything as bad, right? And then how do I feel having those thoughts that are depressing? I don't feel good, right, about myself. I don't feel like I want to do anything. And I feel bad because my thoughts are on bad things. And then my actions, I don't want to get out of bed, or I don't want to do anything, right? Think, feel, act. It's how we're wired. And so everything starts right here. It's why the Apostle Paul in Romans 12 talks about the renewing of the mind, that the Christian walk begins right here with the renewal of the mind, focused on God and godly things, not on worldly, evil, or depressing things, right? We can look at it when we are worrying. If we're worrying about something, we're thinking something bad's going to happen. So now if that's our thought, how do we feel? We don't feel very good. We start to have some anxiety. We have some fear. We have some worry, waiting for that bad thing to happen. And our act, it can paralyze us, right? To where then we don't want to go outside, or we don't want to do anything because we're worried and thinking something bad is going to happen. This is that snowball effect. And so we see it in the scriptures. We're going to turn to 1 Kings 21. So in the Old Testament, go all the way back to the beginning of the Bible, and then start making a little right turn. We have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Kings, right? 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings. So we are in 1 Kings. 1 Kings 21. In my Bible, it's 535. You're probably just a couple off from mine because yours is newer, but it's around there, right? And so, we are in the period of kings in Israel. Israel's first king was King Saul. He ruled for 40 years. Then, the next king was King David. He ruled for 40 years. And then we get Solomon, and he rules for 40 years, right? And so that's where we're at. After Solomon, there's a divorce in Israel. They have a civil war. There's then a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom after Solomon. Then you have a king to the north and a king to the south. The kings in the north, do you know how many good kings they had? 0. They didn't have any in their history. And it's the reason why they get destroyed as a nation in 722 BC by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom of Judah, God's chosen people, they have some good kings, more bad kings than good, but they have a few good kings that keeps them not getting destroyed until 587, 586 BC by the Babylonians. All right? And so here we are in the northern kingdom, the most wicked king in the Bible, King Ahab. And he is married to the most wicked woman in the Bible. Her name is Jezebel. And so we're in 1 Kings 21. It gives us the context. Naboth's vineyard, right? Vineyard. Verse 1. Sometime later, there was an incident involving a vineyard belonging to Naboth, the Jezreelite. The vineyard was in Jezreel. And so you live in Wisconsin, you're considered a Wisconsinite, right? He's a Jezreelite because he lives in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Ahab said to Naboth, "Let me have your vineyard to use for a vegetable garden, since it is close to my palace. In exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it's worth." So the king has his land, he has his palace. Next to him is this man by the name of Naboth, who is nowhere near as rich as the king, who doesn't have near as much stuff as the king. But what he has is that land right by the king's palace and land, where the king wants his land so that he can have a beautiful, beautiful garden. He wants to take his vineyard and make it into a garden. The problem is who owns that land? Naboth. And the king, the government, is trying to come in and take this man's land, right? And so we're going to see a battle ensue. Verse 3, but Naboth replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers." So what's he saying? This land was given to my father and his father and his father. This has been our family a long time. And who gave us this land? The Lord did. And I'm not to sell this land. God promised this to my family, and so I am forbidden to give this to you or to sell it to you or to make a trade here. All right? He is a man of God. The wicked king is not a man of God, and we're going to see that in his actions. So verse 4, so Ahab went home, sullen and angry. What's he doing? He's pouting. He's like a little kid throwing a temper tantrum because he didn't get what he wanted. And he doesn't like to hear no. And he just heard no. And so he is sulking. Have you ever been there? I'm sure not. I'm sure when mom or dad tell you no, you say, "Hey, mom and dad, I love you, and I appreciate that no," and you just move right along, right? You don't argue, you don't debate, you don't pout, you don't get upset, right? Right. All right, you guys are awesome kids, that's why. All right? Sullen and angry because Naboth the Jezreelite had said, "I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers." He lay on his bed sulking, depressed, and what does it say? He refuses to eat. This is you not getting what you want, going to your room, shutting the door, mom and dad coming back up to you later, trying to say, "Hey, come down for supper," and you say, "No way, Jose," right? Pouting. That's what this adult is doing. He's acting like a child, right? Verse 5, his wife, Jezebel, wicked, evil woman, right? Jezebel came in and asked him, "Why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat?" He answered her, "Because I said to Naboth the Jezreelite, 'Sell me your vineyard, or if you prefer, I will give you another vineyard in its place.' But he said, 'I will not give you my vineyard.'" Jezebel, his wife, said, look what she says. She's very compassionate. Not, right? That's why she's wicked. Look at this. "Is this how you act as king over Israel? Get up and eat. Cheer up. I'll get you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite." So get up, cheer up, eat, smile, turn that frown upside down. Be happy. I'll go get it for you, right? That's how she responds. Verse 8. So she wrote letters in the king's name with his seal on it and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city with him. And so we see government, then with a letter with the king's name and seal on it, go to that local part of the government under the bigger part of their area, right? In those letters she wrote, "Proclaim a day of fasting and seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people. Seat two scoundrels, two criminals, set up." She's plotting against Naboth, "opposite of him, and have them testify that he has cursed God and the king." So she puts in two criminals. She's paying them to do an offensive act of a lie that's not true, of then saying that Naboth has cursed God and the king, rejecting the Lord and rejecting authority, even though it's not true. "Then take him out, and the punishment for cursing God and the king, he'll be stoned to death. All right? Wicked woman, right? Verse 11. So the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city did as Jezebel directed in the letters she had written to them. They just do what the king's letter says. Why? Because if they don't do that, they can be put to death. They're just following what? Evil orders. They're just following orders. They proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth in a prominent place among the people. He's sitting at the head table, right? Then two scoundrels came and sat opposite of him and brought charges against Naboth before the people, saying, Naboth has cursed both God and the king. So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death. Then they sent word to Jezebel, Naboth has been stoned, he's dead. As soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned to death, she said to Ahab, get up, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite that he refused to sell you. He is no longer alive, but he is dead. Verse 16, Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, got up, went down to take possession of the vineyard. So, we see the snowball effect of sin. First sin, Naboth is thinking, I want that vineyard. I want that garden to be my garden, right? He's wanting something that's not his, that God never gave to him, and he wants to take it, whether that's in a deal or paying for it. And the owner of the land doesn't want to sell it Naboth. So that first sin started here, him coveting what somebody else had and wanting it. He was envious, he was jealous, he was angry, he was mad that he didn't get his way. So it started with the 9th commandment. Then it led to the 8th commandment. The 8th commandment, lying, right? And what does Jezebel do? Sets up the two scoundrels, the two criminals who lie about Naboth and say that he has cursed God and cursed the king. And then now they have rejected God. They've broken the first commandment, you shall have no other gods. If you break any of the commandments, you automatically break the first one because you're doing what you want out of a selfish desire instead of what God wants. And so now we have the 9th, the 8th, and the 1st, which then leads to Naboth being put to death, stoned to death, and now we have a murder. An innocent life was taken. So that one thought of coveting led to all of those commandments being broken and an innocent life taken. All what started out as a small thought, then the feelings behind it led to actions that were ungodly, okay? So that's what happens. So how do you get the things you want? You work for them, you pay for them, or you receive gifts. But you don't steal, you don't lie, you don't try to cheat, you don't try to take something or scheme in such a way to get something that is somebody else's that God never desires for you to have, all right? Is all coveting wrong? The word covet can be used in a positive sense. Example of things it's okay to covet: a stronger faith, a better knowledge of the Bible, the prayers of others, wanting others to pray for you, to lift you up, a stronger relationship with God. Those are good things because those are spiritual things, right? Those are spiritual things. And so not coveting is not always negative. It can be positive if it's desiring a stronger relationship with God and with other people, all right? So it can be used in a positive sense. From these commandments, we learn they are designed to instill in us an attitude of thanksgiving for what God has given to us, being thankful for what we have. What's our next celebration coming up? Short period of time? Thanksgiving, right? Counting our blessings, thanking God for the things that we have, not focused on the things that we don't have, right? And so that's Thanksgiving. Next, we are to live our lives to be content with what God gives us or allows us to have. We are to be happy and joyful when other people prosper, when they receive a gift or they work hard and they pay for something, right? Not looking down on them, but being happy for them. And we are to serve and help others, all right? That's how we are to live our lives in following the Lord and his commandments. Is that it for slides? Okay. What we see is that same snowball effect with the 10th commandment. With the 10th commandment, what was different from the 9th commandment? 9th commandment was non-living things. 10th commandment, living things. Where do we see this snowball effect of sin? With David and Bathsheba. King David, he's out there on the roof. He looks down, he sees this beautiful naked woman taking a bath. She is already married. He then starts to covet and have this desire for something God doesn't want him to have. What does he do? He sends his men to bring her to the palace. He lays with her, commits adultery. So first coveting, wanting somebody else's wife, then that thought, feelings, I start to have this strong desire for her, and lusting led to an action of adultery. And then what happens after that? She gets pregnant. Now her husband Uriah is out at war. David sends for him to come back home and says, go home and lay with your wife. He's trying to cover up his sin. Uriah sleeps outside on the porch. He says, all of our men are out at war. They're not getting to be with their wives and in their houses. They're out there on the battlefield. It would be wrong for me to go in there and to live with the blessings of life when they're out there sacrificing. That is a man of God right there, right? And so then David, what does he do? He brings him into the palace. He gives him a few drinks, hoping a few drinks will get him to cave and to give up that rightful attitude of not going in the house, and he'll go in there and lay with his wife. But Uriah doesn't do it. So then David takes matters into his own hands and puts him out in the first line of the war, in the battle, and Uriah dies. So the covet of wanting to be with Bathsheba, that lustful desire, then the lying and the covering up, and then eventually the murder of him in war. The snowball effect we see in the 9th commandment with Naboth and Ahab. 10th commandment, we see it with David and Bathsheba and Uriah. All right, any questions with coveting? All right, it is 6:53. We'll break into small groups. We'll do our home project, and we'll be back at 7:16. 7:16.